Hello and welcome to 2 Drops Vlog. I'm Can, and in this video I'll be covering PageSpeed and 5 tips to increase its score. Let's get started, shall we? PageSpeed Insights is a tool by Google that analyzes the content of a web page for both mobile and desktop devices. It uses this analysis to deliver suggestions on how to improve the speed of a page based on using the best front-end practices. Since 2010, Google has emphasized that the speed of a website will be a factor in determining its ranking in search results. The reason for this is because Google is serious about user experience, and the speed of a website is directly related to a user's experience. For example, if a user visits a web page and it takes a while to load, then their experience is not going to be a good one. So if Google determines that a web page isn't performing well, then the search ranking for that web page will be affected because Google doesn't want to promote bad user experience by sending users to slow web pages. Page speed, user experience, and SEO are all now connected with one another. In the past, we might have not cared about page speed as much as we cared about trying to get the highest search ranking or having the coolest website. However, the times of neglecting our page speed has come and gone. And fortunately for us, increasing our PageSpeed score, which will improve the user experience and search ranking, is a rather manageable task. We can use tools such as PageSpeed Insights, GTmetrix, and Pingdom to analyze our web page and give us suggestions on what areas we need to improve on. In some cases, we will be required to make server-oriented changes. Ideally, we would want to make most of these changes to our server's HTTPD configuration file, but depending on the hosting provider and service plan, this file may not be available to us. This is where creating or editing a .hts file in the website's root directory will come into play, and we'll get into that later. So here we are, we're in PageSpeed Insights, and since I'm in Baltimore and it's football season, let's use the Baltimore Ravens homepage as an example. Okay, so the Baltimore Ravens homepage is not looking very good. They got a 58 out of 100 and a 52 out of 100 on their desktop. So they're actually scoring higher on their mobile than their desktop, which is actually good. However, unfortunately, these scores aren't something uncommon that I've seen off of websites or that I've had to help with clients with. And if you go and you look at other football teams, I'm sure their scores will probably closely common to what you see here for the Baltimore Ravens. Anyways, so basically, PageSpeed Insights has done their analysis, and these are suggestions that they have given to the Baltimore Ravens to basically improve their PageSpeed score on. So for the tip 1, we're going to cover how to eliminate render blocking, JavaScript, and CSS in above the fold content. Eliminating render blocking files from the head of the web page will allow the browser to render the content sooner, which will increase the page speed score. Render blocking is the process of keeping the browser from loading the web page, so we definitely want to eliminate that. One of the most common culprits in blocking the browser from rendering the web page is jQuery, which is a JavaScript file. One solution to correct this is to call the JavaScript file in the footer instead of the head section of the web page. However, this might not be such an easy solution if we're using WordPress, because WordPress by default dynamically loads their own jQuery script in the head section. Fortunately, there is a way we can instruct WordPress to stop loading jQuery in the head of our website and instead load it in the footer section. Before we go ahead and do this, it is critical that we make sure none of the plugins on our website are also using the head section to load their own JavaScript files, as they will most likely need jQuery to be loaded first. Once we have made sure there are no other JavaScript files being loaded in the head section of our website, we can then move on to instructing WordPress to load jQuery in the footer instead of the head section. When using WordPress, every theme has a file called functions.php, which is the file we're going to need to write our instructions to WordPress. If using a child theme, then we want to make sure we are using the functions.php file in the child theme. And if there isn't one, then we will need to create one. With the functions.php file opened in our code editor, we will then add this code right here. So basically what we have here is we have our functions.php file, and we're creating a function. Now your theme slug will go here, and then you can call this function whatever you want. I've called it move jQuery. So what it's doing is we're basically checking to make sure we're not in the admin section of WordPress. Then we're deregistering the script, which is jQuery, and this is the default handle that WordPress uses for the jQuery script. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to register again jQuery, and this is the handle that WordPress uses, and we're going to give its location. Now this argument here, if we were using Ajax, we may need JSON2 as a dependency for jQuery, so then we would put it in this array, but since we're not, then we don't need it, and we just can leave it blank. This is the version number of the script, and here this argument true, this basically is telling WordPress that we want this script to be loaded in the footer. If we had placed false in this argument, then it would load it back into the head section, and we don't want that. And then we go ahead and enqueue the script, and there you go. So let's get out of there and let's go back. So for the tip number 2, let's hide this. Let's cover all these minifies. So we got minify JavaScript, we got minify CSS, and we got minify HTML. So minifying HTML, CSS, and JavaScript files will greatly reduce the overall file size, thus increasing the speed of the website and decreasing the amount of bandwidth used, which will increase the page speed scored. Minification is the process of removing all non-critical characters specific to the source code without affecting its functionality. In most cases, this means removing non-critical characters such as whitespace and comments that are normally helpful in development stages, but not so much needed in production. So minification just takes all that out, crams everything together, and gives you a smaller file size. Now I personally use the minification features here in CodeKit, but there's plenty of options available to you. For example, you can use minify JavaScript Online. You can use Refresh SF, which is an online JavaScript CSS compressor, which also now has an HTML minifier. You can use a CSS minifier. I mean, just basically Google the stuff, and there's plenty of minification free options available to you. So for our third tip, let's talk about enabling compression. So enabling compression will typically reduce the file size by 50 to 70%. This will result in taking less time for web pages to load and ultimately use less bandwidth, thus increasing the page speed score. Compression is the process of encoding information using less bits. The most widely used and supported form of compression by web browsers is gzip. Gzip is a generic compressor that performs best on text-based content such as HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Now, the combination of using minification and compression could yield results of decreasing the overall file size by 70 to 90%. That's huge. So if we're using Apache Web Server, then if we add this code right here to our .ht access file, this will enable gzip. So basically, if you have a .ht access file in the root of your website, or if you don't, then you need to add one. You add this code in, and this will basically tell the browser that you basically want to turn gzip on, and these are the file types that you want it to compress. So now for the fourth tip, let's talk about leveraging browser caching. So leveraging browser caching will allow the browsers to cache resources, thus decreasing the amount of time it takes to load a web page and increase the page speed score. Browser caching is the process where the browser temporarily stores the resources of a web page that is already loaded, thus not having to reload them again if they are needed. In order to leverage browser caching, we must let the browser know what resources to store and for how long. So if we're using an Apache web server, then we add this code into our .htaccess file that's located in the root of our website. And this will basically tell the browser, okay, these are the file types that we want them to cache, and then we give them the time for how long. So this right here, it's saying these file types, cache them, for a year. And then these file types, cache them for a week, and so on. Okay, and our fifth and final tip that I'm going to go over is optimize images. Optimizing images is a creative yet analytical dance between quality and performance. There's no definitive approach to striking the right balance between achieving the best compression without compromising the best quality. But when it's achieved, the result is a smaller file and increase in page speeds. Image optimization is the process of decreasing the number of bytes used to encode each pixel, while also decreasing the overall number of pixels. Multiplying those two numbers will give us the image's file size. To achieve the best results possible, we should invest the time to figure out at least 4 things. We need to figure out what elements of the image can be achieved through a different approach, such as using CSS. For example, shadows, borders, etc. Like all that stuff we can now use CSS to achieve, which is then going to reduce the size of our images. We need to figure out what image format will be best for the image we're creating. Is it going to be a GIF? Is it going to be a PNG, a JPEG? We need to figure that out. Next, what is the best software to use to create the image? Is Sketch going to be the best software to use? Fireworks or Photoshop or GIMP? We just need to figure out which software is going to be best to create our image. And then last, what is going to be the best compression technique to use for the image? Is lossly better, or maybe we should use lossless? So these are all going to need to be figured out. Obviously, if the image is going to use transparency or need to be a vector, then those will need to be factored into the decision making as well. Regardless of how I end up creating my images, I always use lossless compression, and that will allow me to have the smallest file size possible without affecting the quality. I personally use the Optimize Images feature in CodeKit, but again, there's plenty of other options. Yahoo has Smush It, there's Image Optim, and Riot. So one of the things I forgot to mention during our covering compression is basically we can use a tool to see if we're actually got gzip enabled. So you can search, there's plenty of tools out there, but this one's check gzip compression. You just enter your website URL for that page, and then you click check, and then it'll give you some results like this, and basically it'll tell you if it's enabled or not, and then what the total amount was before compression and then what it is after compression, and then it gives you a percentage of how much bandwidth you've saved. Now there are plenty of other things we must also take into account when it comes to improving user experience, our search ranking, and increasing our page speed score. But following these 5 tips is definitely a great start. I hope you enjoyed this video. As always, feel free to contact me with any questions or comments that you might have. I appreciate you watching this video, and I'll talk to you soon.